Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to remove and install the Ford Falcon FG G6e headliner in the sedan model. So there are a few things that do change on these models. Being a G6e that we're working on today, it has got the overhead sunglasses console with the two map lights under the sun visors and a dual map lights in the middle. However, they do come out with the dual map lights at the front and the same unit in the middle, or in the middle it might just have a dome light, that's all. The grab handles are all universal on these. The material we're using today is the light oyster number 6 material. So if you're looking for that material, just check the link below in the description. All our products that we use, the glues, the fabrics will all be placed there available for you guys. And the meters required for this job would be 2 meters. So make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Also subscribe to our channel to help us grow, and let's get stuck into the video.
Okay, so it's best to start these jobs with the car parked on a flat surface, so not on an incline or a decline on a driveway, just in case you have to drop down the handbrake while you're shifting the board out. We lay the blankets on the dashboard, the front seats and also the back seats there, fully recline the front seats all the way back on their tracks, and you can see here how this headlining board's basically ready to start to sag. It's going to start to sag on the front here. We're just showing you guys what it will look like, but as you can see, there's a few bubbles in and around the headlining itself. The tools that you're going to need for this particular job will be the T25 Torx head screwdriver to take out the sun visor plugs and the grab handles. Also the Phillips head screw, that's what we just used then to drop down the sun visor itself. And then you're going to need also just a hand Phillips head screwdriver for the sunglasses console, because you've got to be quite gentle there. And also some trim removal tools may potentially help during the removal stages as well. So we usually start by just taking the grab handles and the sun visors off. So sometimes these grab handles can get quite, when you even take off the screw itself, they get jammed in there. So you can see how it's just the actual plastic locator that gets quite sticky and tight. So you just got to get a bit of a force to try to lever it off a bit. Doesn't always happen, but it is prone for these cars anyway. So with that removed, take out the other grab handle as well. So I don't mind doing these ones by a power drill. It's usually quite easy rather than just doing it by hand. But there are some plastics where you prefer to do it by hand as well, especially that sunglasses console that we'll come to soon. So you just get in behind that sun visor clip once the screw's out and just lever it off in the middle there. You can also use a plastic trim removal tool. We just use a flathead screwdriver for that. So that's also a tool that you would need for this particular car as well. We're going to grab the plastic trim removal tools now and just show you how to remove those 2 rear plugs gently, so we're not going to dent or damage the board itself. So you get under the clip with one of those little plastic trim removal tools, and we just got a spacer so that way when we apply a bit of tension, we're not actually digging into the board itself. So we're using like a hard plastic spacer there. It's actually also a trim removal tool. So we took those 2 little locators out the back there, like those little locator plugs. One thing we always like to do is just check the lights before we start. So this is a bit late to doing that, but just before we start the job, just check to make sure that all the lights are working. They are sometimes temperamental, so as you can see here that this one's not really working at all, and they can start to work and then they can play up and not work, or they're just very temperamental type of switches to work with on these Ford Falcons. So come to the front here. This on this G6e, we have actually got a plug that goes into the rear vision mirror. So you want to unplug that, because if you don't unplug that, the weight of the roof lining when you do drop it down may potentially snag there and rip it completely off the windshield, or just a lot of nasty stuff that you don't really want to be putting up with. So unplug that. There's a little cap that hides the wire if you have got it on yours. Just put that in a nice safe location as well, and drop down the sills. You don't have to take the sills off completely on these cars, so we just normally just drop the sills down just enough to get our fingertips underneath the headlining, and we just slightly flex it away from the B pillar, because it only goes under about maybe 2 mils, and then we slide it and flex it away from the A pillar. So you can see here, make sure that mirror also is clear. You don't want the headlining resting on the front mirror. You can even just maybe take the complete mirror off while you're working, but it's not needed if you know how to work around them. So yeah, we just make sure that we're not resting the weight of the headlining board on the mirror itself. So we come here and do the same on the driver's side now. So we just take off the grab handle, with the T25 screws that they've got there. And now we switch to the Phillips head for the sun visor plug itself. There's 2 Phillips head screws. They're usually colored screws, so they're the same color as the pillars. And yeah, we drop down those seals the same as what we did on the other side. So it's pretty cool that I'll show you guys that most cars you actually don't have to take off the pillars to remove the headlining, which is good because the pillars are exposed to a lot of sunlight and a lot of heat, and they get quite brittle. And on some cars, like, you're almost guaranteed that things are going to break when you remove them. So to basically avoid taking off any pillars is always great in my books. So here we just get our fingertips at the back there. There's 2 plugs, so you just get your fingertips behind it and gently pull directly down to release those 2 little Christmas tree plugs. Take that little foam piece out. You'll use that to do the reinstallation as well. Unplug that wire. You just get in there usually with a flathead screwdriver. And then there's a couple of tongues up the front of that little unit. That's what you feed under to anchor it behind the headlining, and then locate the 2 Christmas trees on the installation and then just push it back up. So yeah, that's unplugged now. It's always a great tip to check those wiring before you start, because, you know, if you pinch a wire in the whole circuit's not working, well, at least you know that all the wiring was working and the lights were working before you started the job. So we're basically trying to hold up the headlining board because the weight of the headlining board is coming down now. So you don't want it to come crashing down. You just want to hold it up and then gently come down slowly to see if there's any wiring getting snagged, because on these cars there's a lot of wiring plugs up the front there with the courtesy lights and the sunglasses console. So you want to get behind the headlining like this and just peel off those wiring, flex it away from the C pillar, and then slide it back on the rear backside seat there just to lay the headlining board down. That's why we have the blanket there, so the headlining board doesn't scrape the back seats. Now you can gently get it behind the board itself and just unplug all those wiring. Just peel it off from the board. Usually that's okay. And then just go through it and unplug it all. Just gently making sure that you're not pulling on the wiring harness itself while you're unplugging things. You want to actually grab it from the connector itself. Otherwise, you could put, you know, a bit of strain on the wires and you pull them out, and then you've got to do wiring jobs and stuff like that. There is a little speaker there, so just be gentle with that one. Just unplug that, and yeah, just go through, unclip all the wiring where it's going and getting fed through. Those little map lights, they get unplugged pretty easy too. And place the wiring in a safe location as well. Now I'm going to just rest it along the back seat there, but not where the back of the headlining is touching the windshield. That's why when you do these cars, basically have no baby seats in the car, because if you had some baby seats, the headlining board will raise up the back section and scrape along the back window itself. So always good when you're doing sedans, have no baby seats in the car itself. So these sunglasses consoles are always done by hand. I find that's the best way to avoid any potential breakages, because what happens is the little plastic chambers where the screws go down to, they actually can be broken from factory or just broken with age. So we give them a quick check over, and almost guaranteed you're going to see these little hairline fractures. Sometimes I've seen where the screw didn't even go in the right location from factory. So we have noticed that there's a bit of a breakage on one of those chambers where the 4 screws went into. So usually here, ideally just use some quick fix like super glue just to drop down on the little breakage. That way maybe it hopefully helps it last a bit longer as well. I think we're having a look for some epoxy glue at the moment, so we're going to give it a shot with some epoxy glue. But ideally, I think sometimes it's best, because the dry time of the epoxy might be a bit more delayed. Yeah, just some super glue just to hold it together. I've seen people use a lot of different methods to hold them together, but yeah, it depends on how severe the break is. This one's got a really minor break along the actual chamber of where the screws go through. Another thing we do here as well, we grab some silicone spray or CRC and spray inside those little chambers of where the screw goes down, and also spray the screws as well, because what that will do is help glide the screw in nice and easy, and it just prevents anything going wrong on the installation. So that's a great tip for you guys, just to always do that. It has prevented things from breaking. So we're just going to grab the screws now and also coat them with a bit of that spray as well. So the next step is to remove the headlining board out of the car. So on this model, the FG, and same as the Holden VE Commodore, we do it through the rear driver's side door, and most other sedans we do it from the front passenger door. So you start by feeding the right side down behind the front driver's seat along the side of it. Flex the left side away from the C-pillar. Just avoid scraping the headlining board along any of the interior parts and the seals, because they can get quite sharp and cut into your interior. So that's the one main thing you got to try to do. It's in a nice position now to come out. Give it a slight bow, slight flex. If you do get any little hairline breaks in the board itself where you've flexed it, because the boards sometimes like to just basically flex and then maybe snap in one section. If it does do that, don't stress, because you can repair those. And on the installation, they're usually easier to install anyway, so you won't be breaking the board to reinstall them. But you can just repair them if they were to snap a slightly little hairline fractures on the front or the rear of the board as you're flexing them out. We take off those map lights and all the accessories of this board, ready for the recovery stage. On this model, exactly what we're doing right now, we actually have the headlining board exchange ready. So we have a new one ready to go in. So we're going to apply all the accessories that came off that board to the new board. And then that way it saves the customer waiting around for the recovery stage. So it's the same result. It's just basically a faster turnaround time, because these cars come through quite often. So we're going to do the install now. We're contemplating on who will be doing the install at the moment, but I think we're going to go ahead with myself. And we start by feeding in the rear driver's side door there again, pretty much the same way it came out. And yeah, just slightly flex it in there. You don't have to really worry about this one scraping along the interior or the actual side pillars there, because we actually overlap the material around all edges. And by doing that, it also prevents the headlining fabric from sagging around the edges. So keep that in mind on the recovery stage. If you want to learn more about the recovery stage, check the link below in the description, because we'll have a link there with our best video we've loaded up, in our opinion, that will show you exactly the steps that we take to recover a sagging headlining board. So all the steps and the materials to use. Today's job, we did use one of our materials that we sell. It's the number 6 light oyster flat knit material, and that's the material that matches up to all the Ford Falcon FGs. And the order quantity you would need for one of these, because we sell it at 1/2 meter lengths, you would need a 2 meter cut to do one of these sedans. I think they measure in at maybe about 1.7 meters or nearabouts. So we just sell it at 2 meters, and that will allow your overhang as well, and a bit of offcuts there to mess around with. So with the headlining board in, we've sprayed that sunglasses console with the CRC spray or the silicone dry lube spray. It will allow the screws to go in nicely. We're up to that stage now. We're going to gently, because you always want to remove and install sunglasses consoles in the car, because if you flex the headlining board in and out of the car with the sunglasses console still intact, you may flex and bow the board slightly a bit too much, and it may help snap the sunglasses consoles. And I believe they're not that cheap to buy. So the G6e board or the later models, the AU, BA, and BF sunglass consoles, I think they can get over $100, even up. So we start by just feeding the sunglasses console underneath the headlining and lining it up into location. So there's a little locator in the center there where the little tab comes through, and that locates it nice and center. But we also only feed in one screw first at the front usually, and then put one screw at the back, and they're just in there nice and loose, and then that will allow you to position their sunglasses console nice and center, rather than going, say, straight for 2 screws at the front or 2 screws at the rear. Yeah, just put one either side, so one at the front, one at the rear first, and then that way you'll get it nice and center. Because you'll probably will find that these sunglasses consoles, the actual backing plate with the cutouts of where the screws got to go, doesn't really line up with the sunglasses console itself. So you'll find that the screws are slightly going on an inward slant there favoring the middle, so that's probably what will put the screw under a lot of tension and could actually promote the sunglasses console breaking from that point. So yeah, just focus on this one, getting it all correct. Use that spray as well to help glide the screw in. I like to grab the Phillips head screw right down the tip there and just gently softly just put the screw in rather than going straight to the top. And then once you've got the thread all happening, then you can go to the top of the screw driver itself and just feed the screw in there. So it's always good to not do this one by a power drill, just do it by hand. That way you can feel that the screw's going in there nice and easy, and you're not de-threading the thread itself or just going in on a bad angle. So do it all by hand, do all four, and then we'll move on. So the next step is just to feed the wiring to where it's got to go. So we just line up that center wiring with the rear map light section, plug in the map lights itself, line it up with the speaker of the hands-free kit into the sunglasses console there, and yeah, just line up all the wiring where it's all got to go. If you a good tip could have been maybe take a photo before taking the roof lining out. That way you know exactly what plugs went where, or even just mark them, just in case you're getting left to right incorrect there, because majority of the time the wiring will only go to one place just due to its length. So with all that done, keep your hand underneath the headlining board, because with the wiring installed, it doesn't want to really completely rest by itself on the back seat, so you just want to keep your hands under there, slide out the car, and then lift the headlining board up while you slide back in. So now we're in the car with the headlining board roughly into position, making sure all the wiring's where it's got to go. It's hanging out the front there with the rear view mirror where it's got to plug in. And then we're going to just slide the headlining forward so it kind of bypasses the rear C-pillars, and then slide the headlining board back underneath the C-pillars, and that's going to start to hold up the headlining board. So I'm actually quite a tall person, so I've got a good stretch here, so it may be more difficult if you're a bit shorter and you haven't got as much stretch. You might have to do it a slightly different way here, or also maybe potentially just do one side first and then position the headlining board and then do the other side. So then we slide the front up here, make sure it's missing that rear view mirror. The next step will be to just slide the headlining board now underneath the B pillars to hold it into place. So that's a good tip there as well, guys. You can always start with the B pillars first, because that kind of does help hold the headlining board in place. And remember, it only goes under a few mil anyway, so you don't need to remove pillars on this particular car unless you're recovering the pillars or just spray painting them. Yeah, then you can remove them. So you can see how the headlining board's pretty much holding itself up now with just the rear C pillars and the B pillars positioned correctly. We're going to come now to the front A pillars and just flex them under the A pillars, or flex the board underneath the A pillars itself. Another tip you could do is use the seals to hold up the headlining board at the moment as well. So you, instead of doing that full reach back and trying to feed them in the rear C pillar, you could plug the seals into where they got to go and just feed the headlining board underneath the seals, because that will also help to hold the headlining board up. So with this part, you just want to gently flex the board. It's got a lot of flex here, and you can just gently flex it underneath the A pillars. Good tip there, you could slide the headlining back away from the A pillars, so you're more favouring the board being fed more in the back C pillar, and that will allow you to come forward and underneath the A pillars itself, so instead of doing too much flex. You can see it's a good colour match with the material that we use. So what happens with these cars is the old original material starts to get old and thin, and you can actually, and because the foam itself behind the material is starting to turn orange and it's meant to be like a white colour, the original headlining material can start to fade or darken itself, so it actually looks off center. So when we sell our materials, we sell it based on the closest match to the original factory material, not when it's old and sun damaged. So when you get on the material, it may look brighter and newer, but you can see that it's matched up to the pillars and the plastics very well. And with this part here, we're up to the stage of plugging in the sun visor plugs. And at this moment, you want to make sure that all your wiring harness is not going to be in the way of wherever these screws are going to go. So With these cars, the wiring harness kind of runs up around the front, just after the actual sun visor plug itself, and some of the wiring obviously goes through the middle there, so you just want to make sure that it's all clear before you start. So good idea, just check the lights, make sure that all the lights are working, so you can press it on the console there and just turn on the lights itself. And by doing that, you know the lights are going to work before you start. And then if you hit any of the screws onto the wiring, well, then you're going to earth the system out, and the lights are not going to work. So yeah, just check the lights along the way as you work. That way, you know, say if they didn't work, you know exactly where you went wrong. That way, yeah, it just saves you a lot of time right at the end. If you check the lights right at the end and you go, oh crap, it's not working, where did I go wrong? And then you might have to drop down the whole headlining to find out where you might have nipped the wire, or, you know, squeeze the wire, and sometimes that's all you need to do, and then the whole system can earth out and either completely stay on or blow a fuse and not work at all. So yeah, we start by now just feeding in those rear location plugs, because that will locate the board nice and well. So with the board in position roughly, those plugs are pretty much, by experience, are going to line up perfectly, but you can feed say you just look behind the headlining board itself, and just as you're feeding that plug in, so you get a rough idea of where it's going. And just gently push from the middle, not on any of the edges of those clips, because they can get quite brittle and you don't want them to snap in half. So always push them from the middle center part, as we're just describing there. And right at the end, we also go around and tidy up the headlining board. So if there's any flexes or creases in the rear or the front of the headlining board, right at the end we use just like an upholstery skewer, and you can tidy up the headlining material. And if there is any creases or imperfections, we tackle that right at the end. Also, just by leaving the car out in the sun or in the heat, or just over time, the headlining material will just start to expand and give off a cleaner finish. It's kind of like it just settles, and your best quality is usually seen after a few warm days. So make sure that wiring's all fed. On this car, it's fed up the front and clear of that sun visor clip. And then once you push it in, that's also a locator. So with locating these headlining boards into position, I use the rear. Once it's all fed into the pillars itself, the front, the rear, and the middle, I use those two back clips to locate the rear, and then those two front clips to locate the front. And now everything's in position, so you can go ahead now and put in the sun visors, the grab handles, and finish the job off. Good tip when screwing into plastics, just make sure you're quite gentle if you're using power drills, because some plastics can get quite brittle, and where you get to the point where it's nice and tight, you may have applied too much power there, or the clip is ready to break and there's a bit of sun damage, and the screw can go completely through the clip and not anchor in that well. So yeah, just be gentle with using power tools. It takes a bit of experience sometimes. We just use a flat edge screwdriver then, just to the headlining board itself was slightly pinched, so we just straighten that up. But yeah, this is pretty much nearing the end now, guys. It's basically just putting everything back on, putting the grab handles back into position. Keep in mind, if once you've recovered the job, that when you do feed those screws in, you got to make sure that the screw is not going to slightly snag the material, because if it catches the material while you're screwing in the grab handle or any of the pillars or the sun visor plugs, you may potentially pull the stitching of the actual fabric itself, and then just end up getting like a stitching pull through the material. So just if the screw's going to touch the fabric while you're screwing it in, just be gentle and go nice and slow, so it's not going to catch. Just go ahead now, guys, and finish it off. So now we're up to the installation of that rear middle map light section. So that little foam block that came out on the previous headlining, and we kept on the floor well there, so we just put that back into location. So it's quite tacky still, and you can apply your own glue there just to position it into location and get it to stay there. But the wiring actually goes through the bottom middle part of it, because there's a little gap on that foam pad for the wiring to come out in the center. And then you grab your map lights component and just plug that back in, and there's two tongues on the front of that map light section, and you gotta feed those underneath the headlining board, and then those two Christmas tree type of plastic clips will line up, and then you just push directly up, and that will locate the unit into place. good thing to note here, guys, that middle map light section is exactly the same unit as what's in the front sections on these cars. Not on this car though, because it's got the G6e sunglasses console. But if you did have the dual map lights at the front, they're the same unit. You just got to that middle one has the 2 tongues at the front, and if you were to use the middle one for the front, you just got to break off those 2 tongues, and then instead of using the Christmas tree plugs, you got to use the 4 screws to hold it up. But yeah, that's pretty interesting to know, because if you ever have to buy one and the wreckers only have, say, the middle one and not the front one, well, you can buy the middle one for the front. You just can't buy the front for the middle, because the front, if you were to purchase that one, wouldn't have those tongues anymore. They would have been broken off. Also, don't forget to plug in the rear view mirror as well. So that one just gets plugged in the back there, opposite to the way we installed it. And then you just use that little black plastic clip once you position the wiring center and up the front of the sunglasses console, and it's all positioned center. That little black cap will go in the middle and it will just hide the wiring harness itself. That's what it's designed for. So now we just go through and just give the headlining board a bit of a clean, ready for handover. If there's any imperfections, we'll just tackle those as well. If there's time, we'll park the car out in the sun, just to give the car a bit of warmth and allow the headlining material just to settle and expand and give off that cleaner finish. Usually the best quality is usually seen after a few warm days, but this one looks perfect, and that's great, ready for the handover. If I do invite you guys also to take a scroll through our description below for this video, because that's where we'll add any additional content and updated info regarding what we have gone over today. So any of our latest products and recommendations will also be made available there. And yeah, this is us basically just teaching our employee how to do one of these cars, and we've made it all available to you. So hopefully you appreciated this one, guys, and it's helped you out. The best thing you can do is just give this video some good algorithm. So maybe leave a comment below, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to this channel to help us grow. And also, there is also a donation button as well in our description if you wanted to chuck a couple bucks our way for this video. So, because we actually made it nice and free available for you guys and didn't tie it into any products that you would have to purchase. So that's up to you guys. You can, if you feel generous, you can always do that. Otherwise, that's it. Done. See you on the next video. Catch ya.